Mr Speaker, my question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his statements on KiwiSaver?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, did he promise New Zealanders in a television broadcast, quote, "We're backing a KiwiSaver scheme by putting in 2% and being matched by 2% from the government and 2% from your employer. For every dollar you put in under our scheme, $3 ends up in your account"? And will he honour that promise?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes, and if there are any changes to them, New Zealanders will be able to vote on that. It's called Election Day.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And they will. And they will.
Order.
Mr Speaker, supplementary.
Order. I've called the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, what does the Prime Minister say to Eric Haywood, who states that, quote, "National has changed the rules on us," end quote, and has gone back on its word that it would not cut KiwiSaver entitlements?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, we will be making changes to KiwiSaver and announcing those changes on Thursday. New Zealanders will have a chance to vote on all of those changes and decide whether they want to endorse a national government or not. And if the member is seriously telling us that, by the way, a government can't have a new manifesto and take it to the people of New Zealand, then Labour will be selling assets because they did that in the 1990s with Phil Goff. They'd actually have a proper tax system as opposed to the one that Phil Goff is proposing. They'd be having rational economic policy like Phil Goff had in between 84 and 90. Mr Speaker, governments change their position. Good governments in transparent times take it to the people.
Order.
I thought it was a budget on Thursday, Mr Speaker, not a manifesto.
Order. That was not very satisfactory all round with the applause and then the Leader of the Opposition feeling the need to say something. Let's just have the supplementary question. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, to the Prime Minister, having now reversed the first reversal that he made to the level of contribution into KiwiSaver just 2 years ago, does he understand that changing the rules every time the government wants to cut spending simply erodes trust and confidence in KiwiSaver?
Mr Speaker, the number one way to gain trust is to have a series of policies, go out to the public and campaign on them. And you can't start claiming this government doesn't do that because we've kept our word, and where we want to have a new prescription for the economy, we'll be campaigning on it. The trouble for Labour is they've got nothing to campaign on. We don't know what their policies are. All we know is the bus is gone.
Order.
Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, why was it his government's priority?
Order. I apologise. Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Now that is unnecessary from the National Party backbenchers. And I won't tolerate more of that today. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, why is it the Prime Minister's priority to cut $500 a year from low and middle income earners who are saving through KiwiSaver ahead of taking back some of the enormous tax cuts that he gave to the highest income earners, including people like himself that got more than $1,000 a week in tax cuts?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, if one looks at the tax package that National delivered in 2010, two-thirds of all of those tax cuts went to the bottom two bands. And Mr Speaker, I think the member should stop making personal statements about me which are not correct.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Now it's the Labour front bench. When I've called their leader, they will show some courtesy. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Why is the Prime Minister ignoring the warning from the credit rating agency Standard & Poor's that says that KiwiSaver cuts have the potential to push New Zealand further into debt, not take it out of debt?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, that is not what Standard & Poor's said. Mr Speaker, what Standard & Poor's would recognise is what the government recognises, which is when the government is borrowing to put money in people's KiwiSaver accounts, that's not real borrowing.
Question of
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, why is it borrowing to put money into KiwiSaver, but not borrowing to give $2.5 billion a year in tax cuts to the top 10%?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is an outstanding question, because for a start off, National's tax plan 2010, doesn't matter how many times Labor wants to disagree with it, they're just making it up like they do with so much other stuff, was fiscally neutral. By the way, the entire personal tax cuts right across the board for every New Zealander totalled $2.5 billion. And as we see so often, when Labor can't win the argument with facts, they just make it up and they only say it inside the House, not outside the House.
Supplementary question, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Does he stand...
Order. Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Does he stand by his reply to the supplementary question last week, which asked whether he was aware of Merrill Lynch's collapse and takeover 3 weeks later, 3 weeks before he made his KiwiSaver commitment, quote...
Order. I can't hear the question despite the questioner being right next to me. The Honourable Member may start his question again.
Start again. Does he stand by his reply to the supplementary question last week, which asked whether he was aware of Merrill Lynch's collapse and subsequent takeover 3 weeks before he made his KiwiSaver commitment, when he said, quote, I was not aware of the takeover by the Bank of America of Merrill Lynch. That happened long after I left the company.
The Right Honourable Prime
Speaker, I
Minister.
have no responsibility for that, and I left the company at the end of 2001.
Point of order.
Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister indicated that he had no responsibility. He does
Order.
have responsibility.
No, order.
Well,
No, order. The member's litigating the order. The member's litigating the answer given. The Prime Minister has given an answer, and the House has to accept that answer. I can't second guess ministers' answers, and like the answer or not, it was an answer. It can be tested further either now or in the future, but it was an answer. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, I know that it is your view that that there's some liberalness with answers when it comes to questions which are political. Mr. Speaker, can I ask you, since when has it not been the Prime Minister's responsibility to answer questions about a question that he answered last week? It is absolutely his responsibility.
Order. If we want to get too technical on it, today's primary question asked the Prime Minister whether he stood by all his statements on KiwiSaver. It didn't ask, the primary question had nothing to do with Merrill Lynch, was it, or whoever. As I heard the supplementary question, I thought this is getting pretty wide of the mark. And I think for me to try and insist the Prime Minister answer any more than he has is unreasonable, because the question asked, supplementary question asked, is pretty wide of the mark. And if the member wanted to put down primary questions around that area, then no problem at all, so long as it is in an area the Prime Minister does have responsibility for. And that's my dilemma this time, because that was well wide of the mark.
Further point of order, Mr. Speaker, make it clear again that when I asked the supplementary, I indicated that the Prime Minister had spoken of KiwiSaver in his answer. It was an answer to a question which was entirely it was Wednesday the 11th of May, question 2. It was entirely about KiwiSaver.
Order. Just by mentioning a word in a question doesn't automatically bring it into line with the primary question. I mean, it was a big stretch then, but I didn't rule the question out. I thought, there's a limit to how much I can ask a minister to answer that kind of supplementary question. I believe the Prime Minister gave a pretty clear answer when he pointed out he was not responsible for, and he's not responsible for Merrill Lynch. Whether what the Prime Minister is, there are other avenues members can pursue these matters. Certainly, primary questions can pursue matters in greater detail, but today I feel it would be totally unreasonable of me to pursue that one further.
Further point of order, Mr. Speaker, and I apologise for pursuing this, but I'd ask you to go back and look at the tapes. And, Mr. Speaker, each time I attempted to ask that supplementary question, it started was, does he stand by his reply?
I accept the point the member's making that when that supplementary questions indeed had the Prime Minister mentioned something like that and mentioned Merrill Lynch in his reply today, then indeed that would have been a perfectly fair supplementary question. But given the questions today, I felt the supplementary was on the margins. I didn't rule it out because I thought that would be unreasonable of me. But then I think it would be equally unreasonable of me to insist under those circumstances on any further answer from the Prime Minister today. I'm sure the member will probably, if he wants to pursue the issue, will think of a primary question, though, that brings it within the Prime Minister's responsibility to pursue in the future. Question...
Well, point of order, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry to keep this going, but the primary question was about statements relating to KiwiSaver. This was a supplementary to a question about KiwiSaver. It was something that the Prime Minister said in this House when being questioned about KiwiSaver. I don't think you can get any closer.
I think I've been pretty reasonable. Had the Prime Minister mentioned Merrill Lynch today, I'd have had no problem whatsoever, because the supplementaries to today's primaries must relate to today's primaries. And Merrill Lynch have got nothing to do with KiwiSaver, with statements the Prime Minister's made on KiwiSaver. And that's the difficulty I've got, that had he mentioned Merrill Lynch today, no problem at all, because ministers can certainly be questioned in supplementaries on anything they include in their answers during question time. But to try to make the link back today, I think, is asking me to be unreasonable. I don't believe I can do that. Question number 5. Point of order, is it the Honourable David?
On the previous supplementary, I seek leave to table the summary table from the Executive Summary of Budget 2010, which shows that
Order. All members have got those budget documents. Question number 5, Nikki Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the